Part 26. In the Forge. Suma and I were released without incident, except for the strange staring that Dahal kept doing when he thought I wasn't looking, and a lengthy conversation with the Grand Duke Udoka Sopra, all of which was a show for Suma's sake so she wouldn't suspect anything. He asked me if I was okay and other questions about the attack. Then he started asking me about, well, me. It was mostly ordinary questions about where I was from and how I was adapting to their world. He also asked me about where I was from, what I did, and about my magic. Investigator Dahal also had some question of his own. He wanted to know what kinds of combat training I had. To be fair, I had just killed a wyvern, something that is difficult for a trained group of experienced mages, apparently, in one-on-one combat, so I guess I should have expected people to be curious. Suma answered a few questions as well before the Grand Duke thanked us both for speaking with him, and excused himself, wishing us both a safe day. Before going, he also assured us that he would do everything in his power to punish the nobles who attacked us, and he would make an example of them in case any others got an idea for revenge. I decided not to go home for a couple days after the attack, just in case any more nobles tried to attack Suma. Just like last time, I rented a room from a nearby kennel and paid with my mana. Then Suma and I did something we had been dreading for a while now. We went to the blacksmith. "What did you do? It's only been 3 days!" The Neem who made Destiny, Mori, and Aegis squawked. "How did you even put these holes in it?" he said angrily, as he examined the shield from a perch on the table my stuff was resting on. "And what happened to the spear? It looks like you smashed it with a boulder. Why is the tempering of the metal tip ruined?" The more he talked, the more depressed he sounded. I know, I'm sorry," I said, "but we were attacked, and everything got broken in the fight. Well, except Mori, the sword." The Neem blacksmith sighed. "Well, I guess on some level I knew this would happen eventually. I just didn't expect it so soon." He shook his head and used magic to lift Aegis. He looked over it again and then back to me. "So did they at least do well?" "Yeah, they did. Aegis, the shield, took everything like a champ. I would have been skewered without it, and Destiny gave me range when I needed it. I took out several of those nobles' familiars with her. That wyvern would have killed me if I hadn't had them all," I told him. When I said the word wyvern, his head perked up a bit, and the feathers on his head did too. "A wyvern, you say?" His voice sounding much lighter. "The things I made helped beat a wyvern?" He started standing a bit taller now, and his chest was even poked out. "Well, how about that?" "So can they be fixed?" I wondered. He looked over everything one more time. "The shield will need to be patched and melded back together, but it's doable. The spear, however, that might be a lost cause, at least the shaft anyway. I could retemper the metal, but there is always a chance that a wooden shaft will break again. You might want to consider ordering a new one out of a metal tube. That way it will be harder to break and easier to repair," he explained. "How much is all that going to cost?" Suma spoke up. "I won't lie. Probably a lot. Maybe a whole dal jar," he said. "How much is that?" I asked Suma. "A lot. A dal jar is what we use to store mana outside of our bodies. One dal jar could hold 2 whole days' worth of mana from 2 normal Neem, or maybe about half of a day for a court mage," she explained. "Can I pay half now and half upon completion?" I asked the blacksmith. He wobbled his head back and forth in a thinking motion, then said, "Well, I don't know for sure how much it will cost until it's all said and done, but if you want to put a down payment, then that's fine with me." He went into another room for a moment and came back carrying a small jar-looking thing in his talons. The jar was about the size of his body. "How did you carry that?" I wondered. "It's lighter than it looks, also it's empty," he replied and scooted it in front of me. "Just put in as much as you can manage, and we can worry about the rest later." I knew how to do this part, as it was pretty similar to when I paid for my room at the kennel, only this jar was a lot bigger. I placed my hand on the top of it and started forcing mana into the jar. I had to be careful. The first time I tried this, I broke the jar. Slowly, I let mana flow into the container, but unlike the kennel, I didn't feel any resistance, so I let it flow a bit harder, assuming that I was holding back too much. "Are you okay, Jake?" Suma asked after a moment. "Yeah, I'm fine," I said with my eyes still closed, trying to focus on not breaking the bottle. "Are you sure, son?" the blacksmith asked, sounding a bit worried. "Yeah, why?" I asked, opening my eyes and seeing that the jar was almost full and glowing brightly enough that all of us had to avert our eyes. I immediately stopped as I didn't want to accidentally lose control and break the bottle. "Oh, sorry." The blacksmith peeked around the wing he was using to shield his eyes from the light. "It didn't do that the last time you paid, did it?" "Suma paid last time," I said. "Speaking of which, it didn't cost this much to have it made. Why is it so much to have it repaired?" "Most of the price is the metal tube. It's difficult hollowing out a metal rod," the neem said, still side-eyeing the glowing dal jar. "Jake, did this happen when you paid for your room?" Suma asked. "I don't know. The thing I used then wasn't see-through," I said to her. Turning back to the blacksmith, I asked, "Why are you hollowing out a pre-built rod? Why not make a flat sheet, then roll it?" "Evenly heating a hollow tube with flame magic is nearly impossible alone, and unless you want to pay a higher price, I can't hire someone to help me," he said. I thought for a moment as he covered up the brightly flowing dal jar with a rag, allowing us all to fully open our eyes again. "Can I see your working area?" I asked him. "I want to see how you create the fire with magic and how you mold the metal." My question seemed to catch him off guard, but he agreed, and we walked to his back room. Suma excused herself, saying that she had other business to attend to. I think she just didn't want to watch. "Okay, let's fire up the forge," the blacksmith said, and placed a wingtip on a small red symbol emblazoned on the side of a brick and metal box. The symbol began to glow, and a magic circle formed in the center of the box. Then it erupted into flames. "First, we need to prepare our materials," he said, and flew over to a small pile of metal rods in the corner of his shop. He pointed his graying wingtips at one of them, and a yellow glow enveloped the rod, and it began to float towards a table with runes etched into the top. "What are these for?" I asked, gesturing to the engravings. "Different things. One is for holding the metal in place, another for keeping it hot so it is more malleable, and the final one is to cool it off slowly for the tempering process," he explained. I didn't know much about metalwork on my world, but I did know that this was probably something the blacksmiths of Earth would kill a man for. "Impressive," I said. "Really? Those are fairly standard runes for metalwork. Are they uncommon on your world?" he asked, as he pressed the rune on the forge again, making the flames grow even bigger. "Magic doesn't exist on my world. We have metalwork, though," I told him, and when I did, he looked like I had been speaking gibberish. "A world without magic? How can such a thing exist, let alone have metalwork?" He sounded flabbergasted. "We use a gas called propane to create fire hot enough to heat the metal, and as for the shaping, I think they use automatic machine hammers now," I explained, but he still seemed confused. I spent a few minutes explaining what I did know about Earth's metalworking, which was not much, while the blacksmith nymph sat in stunned silence and occasionally asking a question. Some of the questions I could answer, but most I couldn't. Our conversation lasted so long that the forge almost went cold and needed to have more mana put into it. He was about to do it himself, but I thought it would be a good opportunity to learn how to use runes properly, so I asked him to show me and explain how to use the forge's rune. "It's pretty simple," he started. "Just make contact with the rune, then start flowing mana into it." "May I try?" I asked. He nodded his head, and I placed a hand on the rune and followed his instructions. Flowing mana into it was easy enough, just like paying for something, but as soon as I did, the rune glowed a bright red and the forge nearly exploded. Flames began pouring out of the furnace's opening so quickly that the blacksmith thought it best to close the door. "It wasn't like that when you did it," I pointed out. "You must have put in quite a bit of mana," he said. "The more mana that goes into a rune, the stronger the effect." I wiped some sweat off my brow. The forge had been going for a while, and the room had grown hot enough that I was glad once he closed the furnace door. "So, can you show me how you make the rods float like that?" I asked. "Of course, it's pretty simple, actually," he said, and floated one towards me for me to practice on. "Just imagine wrapping the whole bar in a blanket of mana and manipulate that, as if you are picking it up by strings rather than by the bar itself." It made sense to me, so I tried it. I closed my eyes and held the bar in my hands, then imagined closing a wave of mana around the entire metal bar and lifting that mana up. I felt the metal leave my hand and opened my eyes to see it floating. "You're a natural," he said, and floated a bar into the small open window of the furnace. Thanks. By the way, how long will it take for the metal to heat up? I asked. Not long. It's a flame rune, and the sides of the furnace are made of stones that reflect a lot of heat. So, for a bar this size, 10 minutes, he explained. The time went by fast as I continued practicing moving the bar around and controlling it. Do you want to do the honors of pulling the bar out and placing it on the table? I'd love to, I replied and went over to assist him. Okay, just be careful you don't lose control and drop it. It will be glowing red hot and might burn you if it touches you, he told me. I carefully wrapped my mana around the bar and gently pulled it from the flames. But as soon as it was out, we noticed a problem. It wasn't red hot. In fact, it wasn't hot at all, and neither was the forge. I couldn't feel any heat coming from the fire. Oh no, I realized. I'm sorry, I think I inverted the forge with my magic. What do you mean? The Neem asked. My magic is inversion. I can invert the types of any form of magic. I guess when I used the rune, I must have caused the fire rune to turn into an ice rune or something, I explained. Inversion, he wondered. I can't say I have ever heard of that. He looked over the metal rod and saw that it wasn't hot. But nevertheless, it's fixable. Just place the rod over there and I will fix the forge. I floated the rod to the table he gestured at, and he flew over to the rune. He placed a wing onto the rune and the flames went out, then removed it and repeated the process to turn it back on. I tried to put the rod down and gently as I could manage, but as soon as it hit the table, it shattered like glass dropped from a 3-story window. Sorry, I said, looking down at the shattered mess. How on Atmosia did that happen? The blacksmith exclaimed. I took a quick note of the phrase and reminded myself to ask Suma about her world's name. It must have been the cold, I theorized. The cold broke the rod? He said, amazed. I guess if you get anything past a certain temperature, it becomes fragile, I said, using magic to pick up the pieces and placing them on the table. Just as I finished picking up the final piece, the nymph said it would take another few moments for the forge to heat up fully. That was fine with me. I wanted to try something. I closed my eyes and started focusing on one of the pieces of the shattered rod. What are you doing? He asked as I sat on the floor with a small shard of metal in front of me. Heat. It's just the atoms of an object vibrating rapidly. I want to see if I can induce that effect without flames. All I really have to do is add energy after all. I explained with my eyes closed, still focusing on the shard. I pictured flowing mana into the broken bit of metal, and then causing the atoms of the shard to vibrate quicker and quicker until the metal started to glow. I imagined the atoms absorbing the energy of my mana into themselves. Then I heard it. Now, how did you do that? I opened my eyes and saw a red-hot shard of metal almost beginning to melt on the floor. I can't believe it worked, I said to myself just before some of the molten metal touched the leg of my trousers and caught it on fire. Ah! I shouted and jumped up. I thought for a moment about creating water to put the fire out, but before my brain had come up with a plan, my body had already started swatting at my trousers, trying to punch the flames out. In an instant, but it felt much longer, I started stripping off my bottoms. Suddenly, I was hit with a huge wave of water that put out the small flames. I turned around and saw the blacksmith standing on top of a counter, and a blue rune glowed behind him. Ah ha ha! He cackled in his raspy old voice. 12 years I have had this rune here, and this is still the best investment I've ever made. I looked down at my half-burnt, half-drowned trousers laying on the ground and wondered to myself how I let that happen. Catch many things on fire, then? I wondered aloud and picked up my clothes from the ground. I glanced over and saw that the water had cooled off the metal too, as it was now also dripping wet. I haven't in a while, but yes, he answered and fluttered back to the forging table. Your garments seem to need repair, the blacksmith pointed out. I stuck a few fingers through the new hole burned into the left leg and sighed. They are easy to replace, but it means I need to head home for a while. He nodded his head. That's fine. I can give you a lesson in metalwork another time. I'll call Suma and have her send me back, but before I do, I said, and reached into the back pocket of my ruined jeans and pulled out a piece of paper. I sketched out some designs for the armor I wanted to order. I placed the paper on a nearby table and took a minute to explain everything I wanted and how best to do it. I expected him to be overwhelmed at the thought of making more gear for me, but instead he looked confused. "Jake, what is this material?" he asked. "Oh, you can just make it out of normal metal. It doesn't need to be anything special." I answered him. "No, I don't mean the strange drawings. What is this white stuff you drew on?" he asked. It took me a moment to realize I have not seen even a scrap of paper in this entire world. I have been coming and going from this world for months, but I haven't so much as even seen a torn shred of it floating in the breeze. "It's called paper. On my world, we use it to write stuff down on," I said. "What is it made of?" he asked. Wood pulp, I think. Then it gets dissolved in acid, rinsed off, formed out, then pressed and left out to dry." I explained what little I knew. "Wow, if you sold this, I bet you could make a lot. It is so much lighter than planks," he exclaimed. Planks. Right, I had seen a few neem carrying planks of thin wood around. I guess the nymphs haven't invented chemistry yet. "I think I'll pass for now, but maybe one day," I said, and prepared to call Suma. "Suma, can you send me back home for a bit? I need a change of clothes." "Okay, but I will have to summon you first." "Duck down," she said. I was a bit confused, but did it anyway. I said goodbye to the blacksmith and was summoned to an insanely cramped room. My head was touching the ceiling even though my knees were on the ground. Where are we?" I asked. "We are in—" Suma stopped and looked me over. "Jake, where are the rest of your garments?" "They were burned, so I need to go get new ones," I said. Suma laughed and said she understood, then told me I was currently in her parents' house. "No kidding, I'd love to meet them," I told her. "Perhaps after you get dressed," she said and sent me back. I reappeared back in my room and grabbed a spare set of clothes. I changed everything because I had been wearing the same outfit for a few days now, just washing them with water magic at night. I looked at the time and then immediately did a double take when I realized what I saw. It was about lunch when I left, but my clock said it was almost 2 a.m. and that several days had passed. Part 27. Days Gone By. "Oh no," I whispered to myself and suddenly felt my phone start to buzz over and over again. I pulled it out and saw message after message appear. I guess my phone is receiving all the messages I missed while I was gone, I thought to myself. By the time it finished receiving messages, over 10 minutes later, I had 27 missed calls and 100 text messages. The very first thing I did was get in contact with Suma. "Suma, something happened." "What? Did I send you back to the wrong place?" she asked, confused. "No, the wrong time. Remember how I said time doesn't pass or something when you summon me? Well, this time it did. I left on a Friday, but according to my clock, it is now Tuesday," I told her. "Oh well, I guess whatever was causing you to get stopped in time has worn off. I suppose that is a good thing considering we do not know what was causing it in the first place," she said, looking on the bright side. "Suma, you don't understand. I was in your world for days. That means for almost a week no one could contact me or knew where I was." I tried to explain. "Is that unusual on your world?" she asked. "Yes, very. If someone goes missing unexpectedly for one day, we assume they were kidnapped or killed. I have been gone almost a week," I said urgently and beginning to freak out even more than I already was. "That is not good," Suma said, starting to understand. We talked for a few minutes more, and she did her best to calm me down as I panicked a bit. I could just picture my mum frantically crying into a police officer's chest over me. My stomach was in knots, and I started to get nauseated. I told Suma that I needed to take care of a few things and would contact her after everything was settled. Then I went to my bathroom and threw up. I sat on the floor of my bathroom, thanking my lucky stars that time seems to have at least moved at a 1-to-1 rate while I was away, rather than something crazy like I was gone for months. "Okay, I need to call my mom," I said to myself as I stood up. I turned on my phone and was reminded that it was 2 in the morning. No, she will be asleep. My mom doesn't wake up until 8 o'clock, so until then I unlocked my phone and started going through all 100 messages. Most were from family, but a large amount was from work too, some from coworkers and the rest from my boss. I was pretty tired, so I decided to try and get to sleep, but instead I spent hours lying awake thinking about what I was going to say to everyone. Hey, guys! Sorry I went away without telling you. I had to go help my friend fight a wyvern and corrupt nobles. Oh, and by the way, my friend is a bird nymph who summons me to another world, and I have nebulously defined magic powers. Surprise! Boom! Straight to the crazy house. Maybe I could say I got kidnapped, I thought aloud. No, then an investigation would get opened up and that lie would fall apart in a day with my luck. Hours of this went by until I finally passed out around 5 in the morning. When I finally woke up, I didn't know how long I had slept for, but I knew it wasn't long enough. I woke up groggy and still slightly sick to my stomach, especially when I realized it wasn't all just a bad dream. My clock, as stupidly bright as it could possibly be to my weary eyes, said that it was 10 in the morning. I had decided last night that a phone call wasn't going to make up for everything, so I would go to my mom's house as soon as I woke up. I got ready and left as quickly as I could manage. The drive there was slow and nerve-wracking. I still hadn't thought of a convincing lie, and I doubt I could fool my mom anyway. She may believe me when it comes to friends she hadn't met, like Suma, but disappearing for a few days is completely different. I pulled up to her house and parked the car. By the time I had gotten out and started walking to the door, she had already heard me and checked to see who it was. Upon realizing it was me, she ran outside crying and hugged me. "Where have you been?" she wailed and hugged my neck so tight I actually started to see stars. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to be gone for so long," I said sheepishly and hugged her back. We continued hugging for a moment while she sobbed. Finally, she let me go and asked again in a shaky tone, "Jake, where have you been?" I didn't know what to say. She would see right through a lie, not that I had one anyway. And I couldn't tell her the truth because... Wait, why can't I tell her the truth? I thought to myself. That's kind of hard to explain, but give me a minute to think and I will try, I said to her. I need to organize my thoughts. She looked at me funny but agreed. I closed my eyes and pretended to think, but instead I called Suma. "Suma," I said in my head. I knew this method would work as I had done it before. "Yes, Jake?" she answered, sounding sleepy. "Do you have anything against me telling my family about you?" There was quiet for a moment, but she answered, "No, not that I can think of anyway. Are you considering it?" "Yeah, can you summon me and my mom?" I asked. "Two people, I can try," she said unsure. "Please do." I asked her and opened my eyes to see my mother's genuinely concerned face. "Mom, something's about to happen. Don't freak out when it does." I then hugged her neck. "Oh, well, why would you hugging me cause me to freak out, darling?" she said and hugged me back. Then I felt that familiar feeling, like my legs started to fall asleep, and it moved up my body until it hit my arms and head. Then everything went dark. All while this was happening, Mom started to complain that she felt unwell and she tried to pull away from me, but I only hugged her tighter. "Oh, Jake, I think you need to let me go. I'm starting to feel faint." Then I felt her hand let go of my back and she started to scream, "Jake, my hand! My hand is gone!" And with that we reappeared in Suma's cave. Part 28. Mothers and Memories. I let her go once we had reappeared safely, and she proceeded to freak out in the most British way I had ever seen, standing stock still and carefully looking around the room, breathing heavily. She did eventually start speaking again, however. "Jake, I think perhaps you should call an ambulance. I seem to be hallucinating." "You're not hallucinating, Mum. Everything you thought you saw is happening," I told her calmly, trying to keep her from having a panic attack. She carefully and slowly looked down at her hand with horror in her eyes. "Jake, my hand. I saw it vanish," she said, worried. "Yes, that happened too, but it's back now," I agreed and pointed out. What is happening?" she asked. "Mom, let me introduce you to Suma," I said, motioning to her. Suma was crouched on the floor, breathing heavily. Are you okay, Suma?" I asked once I noticed. "That asterisk cuff asterisk was asterisk cuff asterisk hard," she said in between her panting. "A sparkly bird?" my mom asked, confused. "But I thought you said Suma was a friend from school?" "Yes, but to be fair, how was I going to explain this?" I said. She quickly looked back and forth between Suma and myself. "Ah, I get it. This is a prank." She laughed in denial. "Jake, you know how much I disapprove of pranks, but I have to admit this one is pretty impressive." I shook my head no. It's not a prank, Mom. It's just a very long story. She didn't seem to believe me, so I decided to move on and continue with introductions. Anyway, Mum, like I said, this is Suma, and Suma, this is my mum. Nice to meet you, Suma said, standing up and collecting herself. I looked over at Mum, but she didn't seem convinced. Then it hit me. Mum, what do you hear Suma saying? I asked. She looked at me confused. It sounds like a bird. Why is it glittery? You didn't pour glitter on this poor thing, did you? She scolded. No, Mum, I turned to Suma. Suma, what do you hear my mum saying? Well, it kind of sounds like barks and grunts, honestly, she said after finally catching her breath and standing up straight again. Needless to say, I was annoyed. I didn't exactly want to spend this whole time acting as intermediary between a woman who thought I was going crazy and Suma. Suma, how did you get me to understand you when we first met, or rather third met? I asked. I linked with you and showed you my memories, that is all I know. I never figured out how we actually ended up understanding one another's languages, she told me. While Suma and I talked, my mom looked on with worry and awkwardness. Okay, well, let's just try that, I said. Mom, Suma is going to enter your mind and show you some of her memories. We think that will allow you to learn her language, but we aren't sure. Jake, I think we need to both go to the hospital, she said, putting a gentle hand on my shoulder. Trust me, Mom, and don't freak out when it starts okay. You will be fine, I told her before telling Suma to begin. She bowed her head and raised her wings. Then a magic circle formed around her and Mum. I wasn't privy to the memories, but I could guess what was happening based on my mum's reactions. Jake, what is happening? Ah! She gasped. How far should I show her Jake? Suma wondered. Just show her up to the point where I accepted being your familiar, I suggested. What is that monster? Mum said, shocked. She was probably at the part with the borog. Her hands covered her mouth and she looked as if she were going to be sick. I should have expected this part, honestly. Mum hates violence and she can't handle gore. She never wanted to watch action movies on family movie night when I was growing up. It's why I have seen 13 going on 37 times. Ah! She jumped. Goodness, Jake! Where on earth did you get a gun? I rented it at a shooting range, I said, but I wasn't actually sure she could hear me since she didn't respond. Okay, we are almost done, Suma said, and the magic circle she had created started to fade. So, can you hear her now? I asked. Jake, what was that? Mom asked, shaking. I think it worked, Suma said. Mom looked over at her shocked. That bird just spoke. You know, I think you're right, I joked to Suma. Mom, allow me to finally, and this time properly, introduce you to Suma. Hi, Suma chirped happily. Jake, that sparkly bird has psychic powers and it can speak. Mom repeated herself. I turned to Suma. I think she is in shock. Let's give her a minute to process. We waited for a few more moments while Mom came to grips with what was happening and with what she saw in Suma's memories. So, the Suma you told me about is a bird, and it can use magic, and it has psychic powers, Mom eventually said. Pretty much, I confirmed. What is a bird? Suma asked over our private link. It's a small winged animal from my planet that can fly, I replied. The name do look very similar to one. And you work for her, Jake? Mom asked. Sort of, yeah. We're partners and I'm her familiar, I explained. And this is where you have been for the last few days? She wondered. Fighting those creatures? I only showed her up to the first encounter with that borog. She does not know about the nobles or the wyvern, Suma said over our link. Well, that was just the one time. Really, I have just been helping her train, and in return she has been teaching me how to use magic like her. I lied. But it didn't work. Jake, I'm your mother. I always know when you're lying to me. Now tell me the truth. Is she mind-controlling you to do this, to fight these things? I couldn't tell if she was asking me that or Suma. Jake, what is your mother's name? Suma asked. It's Susan Vandal, I told her. Miss Vandal, Jake is strong and smart, not to mention incredibly powerful. There is nothing to worry about. Even if on the off chance that we are ever attacked, they would be no match for Jake. Suma tried to reassure her, but I could tell it wasn't working by the annoyed look forming on Mum's face. Mum, you saw her memories. Suma can't control me. She tried years ago and failed, I said. But as soon as it left my mouth, I regretted it. And that's another thing, she was starting to shout hysterically. Why are you working with her if she tried to control you? She kidnapped you and forced you to fight a dangerous monster. Why team up with her if you aren't mind-controlled? I admit that was a bit of a hurdle, but I've long since forgiven Suma for that, and we've moved past it, I said. Miss Vandal, I would never do that to Jake again, and I could not even if I wanted to, Suma said. Things were getting heated, and Mum wasn't calming down. How many times have you had to fight like that, Jake? And don't try lying again, Mum pressed. I sighed and relented, knowing I wouldn't be able to fool her, including the one you saw in Suma's memories 3 times. She glared at Suma with hatred-filled eyes. You made my baby boy risk his life 3 times. No, Mom, it's not like that. I saved her from these nobles who were attacking her. I tried to calm her. Show me, Mum demanded. I want to see. If you have the ability to show me memories, then I want to see. That is not a promising idea, Suma said reluctantly. Mum, calm down, I told her. That was a mistake. I am calm, she bellowed. Suma recoiled at Mum's screaming. Send her back, I said to Suma over our private channel. I cannot unless you are touching her, but are you sure it is wise? Will that not only make her more upset? Suma asked. I hugged Mum around the neck. Do it. I'll deal with the fallout at home, I said to Suma. Wait, are we about to? Mum started to say, but we disappeared before she could finish. Mum and I reappeared back outside her house, and it took another few hours of talking with her and explaining what was going on before she finally started to settle down. I'm just so scared for you, Jake. I know, Mom. I was scared at first, too, but being with Suma, going to her world, it's the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me. A little danger isn't going to stop me from living out the greatest adventure I've ever been on, I explained. She stayed quiet for a while. You've been through so much, and in such a short amount of time. Well, it has actually been a while from my point of view. For some reason, until recently, whenever I would travel to her world, time would stop or something. Or maybe I was just getting placed back from when I left. I don't know, but I do know that it didn't do it last time. That's why I was missing for so long. I spent a few days over there. I told her. Mom asked a few more questions, and I answered what I could. She asked about Suma and why she wanted a familiar. She asked how it was possible that magic was real. And finally, she asked the big question. So what happens now? Now, I go see if I still have a job. If I do, then I think it's best if I quit. If I don't, then I think I can come up with a lie to at least give them some closure, I said. Mum and I said goodbye, and she asked me to apologize to Suma for her behavior for her. Then I went straight to work. If you love engaging stories like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated with all the latest episodes from FY Stories.